Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Arcantu here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey, TGIF. It's a short week, but short weeks always somehow feel longer to me somehow. And for many of us who have children in school, this was definitely a busy week in terms of getting back to more traditional routines than the summer brings. And for us, and for a lot of folks, it's also coming back from vacation. YWTV was on a little hiatus for the end of August. And what a great way to come back today to have a very special guest that we've really been looking forward to. She is a female leader who is so committed to children in New Jersey and their educational well-being, amongst just being I'm just going to say it, a badass. We're just so happy that we have her here, and I just want to welcome our Senate Majority Leader, Teresa Ruiz. Thank you for being with us, Senator Ruiz.
Thank you for having me.
And so our viewers, I want to tell them a little bit about you. In 2007, Senator Ruiz became the first Puerto Rican elected to the Senate. Since then, she has been reelected 5 times. Currently, the senator is she is the highest ranking Latina legislator in state history. She previously served as chair of the Senate Education Committee. Throughout her time in the Senate, she fought for equity in educational spaces, acting as a leading force in expanding access to early childhood education throughout our state. She also spearheaded the law to build on federal free and reduced meal program and has sponsored laws to increase diversity within school curriculum and strengthen the Amistad Commission. The senator has worked so hard to expand employment opportunities for underserved communities, sponsoring bill packages to expand apprenticeship programs in the state and increase teacher diversity. And in addition, she has taken a targeted approach at mitigating the barriers which prevent people of color from obtaining and retaining full-time teaching positions, advancing legislation to establish educator apprenticeship programs, provide loan redemption opportunities, and expand alternate route programs. She received her bachelor's degree from Drew University. She was a 2010 Aspen Institute Rodel Fellow and a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School Senior Executives in State and Local Government Program. She is vice chair of the Essex County Democratic Party and is deputy chief of staff to Essex County's she was right. I was going to say there's a wrong. You currently are. Okay. Mm-hmm. Ed is deputy chief of staff to Essex County Executive Joseph DiFincenzo Jr. She served as a delegate in the Democratic National Convention in 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2016. And among all of her accomplishments, and I can fully appreciate this, the title she holds most near and dear to her heart is that of mother. And if you follow her on social media, as I do, and I know so many others do, you really get a glimpse of really how her motherhood role really informs her legislative role and vice versa, and how she really is taking, what she's doing in action and being a model for her daughter and other children in our community as well. So, and by the way, that didn't even touch most of it, but at least it gives a background. But thank you again.
That was too much. But that last line always, when someone ends up reading that, you know this better than anybody else. It's like, I guess it's when I'm a little tired or I'm super emotional all the time, which I love because I think it gives me power and purpose. But that line, it just gets me all teary-eyed, and it does so for 2 reasons, Helen. And one is because obviously, becoming a mother is an extraordinary thing. It's the first time that you realize all responsibility as a human being that you have an adult for children. Can you hear me okay? And the second thing is that when we think about our legislative spaces, I'm the first and the only woman in the history of the state of New Jersey on the Senate side to give birth while in office. And that's big and it's sad. It talks about having us. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think there's a little technical difficulty, so I don't know if everyone can hear on the Facebook end.
Should we wait, or are you okay
But
me? Up?
no, I think we're okay now. I think it came back. So, but Senator, I can fully understand. I can fully understand what you're sharing in terms of that. That motherhood piece, and it's I was reflecting actually that yesterday was working mother equal pay day. For sure. And there's so many aspects to being a mom and being in the space, especially, so few moms are in the space that you're in, and the importance of having moms and, women in that space and how different, um, our culture is, we're changing and shifting with that mindset of that duality, for sure, for sure. So, there's so much to jump into. It's hard to know where to start, but I guess we'll start with your work on educational access and opportunities for all. I mean, you've really made this a platform and priority for your work, and based on kind of your earlier comments, it also makes sense. Why that is an imperative for you. But can you speak a little bit about why that ended up being an
Yeah,
area of real
absolutely.
focus for you?
So I taught in a child development center, and this was pre-Abbott, and I had a classroom of 4 year olds, and I recognized several things in that space while working. Teaching is the greatest career path and profession that anyone can commit themselves to. That we don't do justice to the profession in supporting
Mm,
and really raising it up. I remember having these conversations from the college level. People would say, worst case scenario, I'll become a teacher, right? Like if they couldn't find pathways somewhere else. And then as an adult, having parents share stories about their children, very proud. My son is clerking for this judge. My daughter's doing her residency at this hospital. And then if there was a third parent in the mix, oh, they're doing their teacher student practicum, and everybody would say, "Oh, that's nice," right? Almost
mm,
that was the one person that we all should be like sending a debt of gratitude, because they are molding and building and keeping budgets straight. I mean, to me, everything fundamentally just goes back into that classroom. Not that you don't need wraparound services and all these other layers, but give a child an opportunity to reach their God-given potential in an academic setting that is respectful of that child in ways that it's resourced and it's a high quality school environment, and the list can go on, and you see the dynamics of the state in this country will change. I believe that, and I know it because my father only went to fourth grade. uh,
mm,
in Puerto Rico, I'm the first one in my household to get a college degree, and the only one. My sister went a different pathway, which you could still do at the time, right? She went into a business school kind of environment and has done really well. And my father was, and my mother, extraordinarily successful. But even looking at my two parents, my dad, you know, owned a bodega, did kind of that entrepreneur route, then started working in a factory, and that's where he retired from. My mom got her GED here in the state when she moved, and she worked in an air conditioning office for the rest of her life and retired from there. Now you start seeing that the complexity and the difference of
mhm.
and then here I came along. My trajectory, my experiences were extraordinarily different, and so having high quality spaces for academic success is not solely to have a high achiever in the classroom, it's to build that next generation of New Jersey taxpayer.
Yes, yes. And, I couldn't agree more. I mean, our work at the YWC of Northern New Jersey is so linked to children and families in our community. We're one of the largest childcare providers and we work on school-based programs, here in New Jersey. So, we are interacting with our educators. We have a program right now with our Raising Race Conscious Children partnership where we've been educating elementary school teachers on proactively talking about race in the classroom. So, so very important because they are raising our next generation of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're government leaders, like you, and civic leaders, or nonprofit professionals like myself. Um, but this is who is shaping, our future lawyers, our future doctors, fill in the blank, everyone. So to that end, and I also want to say we have Tez watching, and she's saying that she, also is so committed to supporting teachers in any way, and has even making the suggestion that our viewers connect to their teachers to find out wish lists, because very often they need help from the community to be able to provide an environment for our kids
And can we just
that has everything.
can we put a pin in that?
Yes.
It is extraordinary to me that this so this is a title that makes me cringe. It's one that's true for some districts, but it's not true for the entire state. New Jersey nationally gets ranked as the #1 public school education system in the country. And the fact that we still have teachers who need resources and
Yes.
that we have to reach out, there are huge gaps in different spaces, and that's frustrating for me because I know that we can do much better, right?
Right.
When the pandemic hit and I kept screaming about technology because people were like, let's turn the buildings off, close the classroom, let's turn on the computer. If you have a
Right.
computer, if you have access to broadband, and if you have the luxury of paying $79.99 a month or whatever it is for internet and broadband access, like almost having a myopic approach to not recognizing that every single household is extraordinarily different. But then you pause and you step back and you say, we're #1 public school systems in the country, or at least we've been given that title.
Hmm.
It was 2020. Why don't all students have access to a one-on-one Chromebook to begin with? Should be part of the textbooks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that speaks to, the inequities, for sure. We know that there's our education system, like most of our systems, are, fully inbred with systemic racism.
Hmm.
And, what we do know about COVID, as it's been said over and over again, is that it definitely put a spotlight on what was already there. But we really can't close our eyes to it now. We need to keep moving forward. And I do appreciate that you are one of our leaders that has been raising your voice and keeping a firm focus, on this so it doesn't get lost. So, with that, and I think, there's so many pieces of it that are so important about dealing with that systemic piece, but um, we want to make sure that the teachers are reflective of the community and that they don't all just look like me, and how important that is that our teachers are diverse, but yet, well, folks from diverse communities historically haven't had access to teaching positions or been moved. You've spoken about the importance just now about the importance of us as a collective looking at teaching as something we should be proud of and supporting folks going into it. But let's talk about that next piece of it, that next layer of it. How are we getting our teachers to have, to be a diverse workforce as well, so that our students can see themselves in who is educating them.
So we had a whole hearing dedicated to this, and I think if I recall properly, and don't everyone get mad at me if I'm saying this wrong, but I think it's right. It was like 1 in every 100,000 plus students in the state would go throughout their pre-K through 12th grade without seeing a person of color in their classroom, and that's
Mm,
staggering. In that
yes.
same hearing, there was a woman who had taken the praxis exam. She was on the 12th time of taking her praxis exam. She was in a charter school. They wanted to hire her. She was a highly qualified teacher. She could not pass the praxis exam because, and this goes back to equity in the classroom. So
Hmm.
if I come from a low performing district, right, and that's where I got my math background. I go into an academic setting for higher ed for early childhood. My focus is on early childhood. I don't revisit math again. Some of these praxis exams were still giving components of geometry. 6 years after the last time
Yeah.
you probably opened up a textbook. And if it was from an environment where you weren't exposed to a high quality curriculum to begin with, so we started asking those questions: is how can you remove these kind of embedded pitfalls that really don't make sense? What does an early childhood educator need to know about a component of math if in fact they're not teaching that space? Eliminating kind of those barriers, obviously looking at opportunities to make it easier because these exams cost. She was on the 12th time. She finally passed the 13th
Yeah.
time. We also did a bill for apprenticeships, and that's kind of rethinking about how we educate the next level of education teachers, moving more outside of the higher ed environment. So it's great to have a professor talking to you about pedagogy and curriculum and truth and history. It's more important to have a high quality teacher teaching you that in a classroom, as
Hmm.
opposed to it happening cold shoulder the first day that you get your license in the state. And I think, we've put bills and we put money in the budget there too, is to forgive loan redemption programs. Federally, this country had a big program where they send droves of individuals because they covered the higher ed costs of teaching. I think we're at a turning point where we need that again. We need to elevate the profession to a way where people know and understand that it's competitive, that it's a high quality working space, that you're going to be compensated properly, and that we're going to help you get there and be well while you're in those spaces to be sure that we keep you. So,
Hmm.
it's retention is part of it. It's also, bringing people into the fold and making it affordable to get into that space. If you graduate with $70,000 in loans, and
Yes.
and then you go into a work environment where you're getting paid $50,000. I mean, so it's just looking at, to me, from a common sense approach lens. We've done specific bills to recruit men of color, who I think are the least represented in this workspace,
Hmm.
because we do know that it matters that when we see ourselves in the classrooms, there are still obstacles, and there are, extraordinary things that we will have to overcome, but at least you see yourself in a space where you didn't before, and that helps with academic outcomes.
Well, we're so grateful to have, leadership that is seeing all these various layers of the issue, and keeping us focused and, creating policy around that. It's so, again, just really want to lift up what you said, how key our educators are, but at the same time, how broken the system is,
Mm.
how, to get people through the licensing exams, because they, we're seeing this even with social work right now. There's a whole discussion about all of these exams and how they are, fraught with racism, in the exams, and that it's literally keeping people of color out of, these professions, and that we really have to be addressing these issues. And they're multi-layered. The systemic racism is multi-layered, so we need to be looking, at all of these pieces so that we can, you can't just shift and fix one piece of it. All these pieces have to be kept as part of the
Well,
conversation
the
for
first
sure.
the first key is to really have an honest conversation about what we're dealing with, and that's honestly a cornerstone of frustration. Often, I think, when you're creating policy in government, we
Yeah.
can't pretend to be this kind of a state and not recognize that we are all different in this state. So, all of us call New Jersey home, um, but each of us came here a different way. Some people are calling New Jersey home. There could, because their parents brought them, right? They were seeking
Hmm.
asylum, looking for a better quality of life, and yet there are still avenues that, then, because you don't have access to a social security number, that prevents you from improving your quality of life in those spaces. So it's important to just look, and there are uncomfortable conversations to be had, because
Hmm.
when you're going to change systems that are broken, you must have uncomfortable conversations, because the truth is not always pretty.
Yep. That's true. We have to keep them going, and call out, and then soak in and move forward. We definitely have to move forward. So I have to say, I mean, obviously we know that education has been such a focus of your work, and I appreciate you sharing, some of the initiatives you worked on and why it's so important to you. Um, you know, we're seeing history over this last year, and especially in this new budget around childcare also. I mean, these are interrelated issues, and especially going back to, talking about working moms equal pay day yesterday. Part of the reason that, working moms are at 56 cents to the dollar for their to the working dads is because, we're juggling that childcare, aspect, and those things are impacting our ability, to be recognized in the workforce, appropriately. Um, what are your thoughts, and, what else would you like to see in the realm of education and childcare, and, where we're moving in childcare as well this year?
So the one thing I would tell you that the pandemic lent truth to empower to my agenda, right?
Hmm.
For people like yourself in the space, and probably a great portion of our families who are watching, we always understood that there was a problem with the childcare system in the state, not unique to New Jersey. I just came off of talking about early childhood and accessibility, and all the avenues that we have to get by, recruiting the next generation of workforce, supporting facilities that have been open. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. So it's not unique to New Jersey, but we've been talking about the fundamental importance of our childcare system as part of the economic engine in the state far before COVID hit.
Yeah.
What COVID did was that my colleagues started to recognize, oh, if the daycare is closed, my employee is not coming to work.
Yeah.
And the domino and ripple effect that happens. We were always looking at it from a lens of equity, that if in fact we empower that woman to offer her a high quality space to drop her child off, she can make her independent decision whether she's going to go into the workforce, pursue higher ed, whatever it is that she's doing to improve her quality of life. So I think that the pandemic lent power to that agenda and kindly put all eyes on the prize here. So we were able to really elevate a package that has been critically needed in the state. We just signed the Thrive by Three bill, and what does that do? It expands seats in the state. It gives facilities fund. It gives entities money for facilities improvements, and it touches on different sectors of even the employee base. But there's still much work that has to be done. I have a package of 6 to 8 bills that I would like to see them all land on the governor's desk and get signed. I do fundamentally believe that the state should focus on creating a department of early childhood. You know,
Mm.
when
Yes.
I started chairing the education committee, this state always looked at academics as a K through 12 issue. And I started reshifting that. It's zero to taxpayer.
Yes. Yes.
And look at it through the lens of public safety and through the criminal justice system and through resources and through remediation. Everything, if you do it, kind of combines and intertwines. You realize the cost savings that you have when you do it and you make the investments early on. So we know that offering a high quality childcare seat to a family and a child exponentially reduces cost for any kind of remediation that student may have later in life, because things are picked up and they're dealt with early. It also creates an academic boost for that child, and we saw that early on when the Abbott preschools were first tested with the first round of state exams. It does all that kind of reinforcement on a human scale and an academic scale, and then it also provides the working family an opportunity to make decisions independently about work, employability, and things that they need to do to survive.
Yes.
So, creating more of a focus from a 0 to 5 space, so that conversation of the womb to actual entering into an elementary school doesn't get lost into a broader conversation of a K through 12 old kind of a language, and to really make it easier for providers to have a one-stop shop. Anyone who's watching this and is in this industry, you know that if you're going to open up a facility, you're touching every single department at the state. DCA, DP, DOE, DHS, DCF. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And for everybody watching, I should be more familiar. It's Department of Community Affairs, Department of Children and Families, Department of Health,
Mm.
Department of Environmental Protection. And so that's huge and overwhelming. Let's make these pathways easier for someone who's interested in opening a high quality facility. Let's recognize that the majority of the people in this workspace are women, and women who probably don't make enough to afford sending their child to those spaces as well, right? So recognizing all those levers and creating a broad approach as to how we can better support the industry, support the employee in the industry, and therefore we're supporting the families in the community. And so we're doing a really good job about expanding preschool, and that's for the seats of 3 and 4 year olds. But in
Right.
my neighborhood, where we have supreme, excellent, high quality childcare providers in the preschool space, because we were part of the prior Abbott decision, we are still in a child care desert.
Mm.
Infant and early toddler seats are
Yes. Hard to come
nearly
by.
not non-existent. So when
Yeah.
I was looking for childcare for my daughter, I was looking at a location that was 25 minutes away without traffic. I come from a household that has two vehicles, and we at least had the opportunity to talk about it. It would have been the cost of tuition at one of the state institutions for the year, easily,
Mm.
on a low end scale. And you're sitting there thinking about, at least I have the opportunity to engage in this discussion. And if that means making sacrifices, because it would. And I knew that I ended up with a different route, and I found a phenomenal caregiver who was a retired educator in the past. But it is an extraordinary financial burden to the household. It is like attending college. And so, what ends up happening to the head of households who's alone, or the household that's multi generational, only has one income coming in? Are decisions being made in the best interest of the child to fully develop academically in a strong learning environment? Or are decisions being made to cut corners because of economies of structure? Or is the head of household saying, well, I'm not going to go back into the workforce because I need to stay home and take care of my child? That is no decision that any single human being in the state or this
Right.
country should make. When you think about the resources internationally, I remember watching a sitcom, and interrupt me if I'm babbling here because I could talk about
No.
days and hours. I remember watching a sitcom on some show, and I think it was a British sitcom, and the woman was on maternity leave and she wanted to go back to work, and someone said to her, but you still have 285 days left or something. And it took me a little bit. And I was like, what is she talking? There are countries that give women a year off.
You're
And not only do they do that, they pay for childcare. They offer for you to go back to school because they recognize that if you support that human being during that time frame to make the best decisions on behalf of the child, that after that 1 year investment, their reliability back on the government gets smaller and smaller, and that the success is for both that household and for the entire country as a whole. So I was
yeah.
jealous. I would say the least. I was jealous. I that is one space that I think we can do better, which is, and New Jersey has already made strides, and we've added time and compensation in that space for family leave. But it's tough. No person, and predominantly women in the space, should have to make the decision of, do I stay home, do I drop off at a family member's house, or do I not go to work?
Work.
I mean, it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah, and unfortunately in this day and age that still is very much a decision for so many people here in our state and across our country, of course, as well. And I couldn't agree with you more. And for those of you who are watching and are followers of the YWCA, that we send out regular action alerts to try to to get folks rallying around the issues related to our mission, that are support our mission. And this idea of really focusing on early childhood and separating it out from education as a whole is so key and important as an organization that has a history of doing early learning programs as well as school based and school age child programs. It's really very different work, very different mindsets, but they build on each other for sure. So they need to have a connectivity to it, but it really does need very different leadership, different thought leaders connected. It's different research attached, to these areas. So I our members can be watching because we will be sharing more information about, what the senator is talking about. So, uh, and Tez is also now sharing about the pre-K expansion in West Orange, was rolled out yesterday. And I know across the state, there's so much gratitude for what's happening, and what has happened in this budget. And again, it's historic what we're seeing in this budget. It's you know, terrible that we had to have, national tragedy of, epic proportions, to get us here. But at least we're learning and putting, these key pieces in place, for us to go forward for sure. So I want to make sure to lift up that, September 15th is the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month. And, as I shared, you yourself have made, New Jersey history by being our first Latina in the state to hold the position, that you hold in our state's upper house. Can you speak a little bit about being, you know, the
Yeah.
history maker, and then what that means, and how we bring many more to come behind you, so that you're not the first and the last. I know, we very often talk about how we've, had one female governor in New Jersey, but we've not seen another one since. We don't want to see you be the first and the last, and we want to see a strong, steady stream behind you.
So what I will say is, because I always giggle when I share this with everyone. When I got elected, it was I always get this wrong. I got elected in 2007, and I sworn in 2008, or it was either 2008 and then sworn in 2009. Forgive me again. I don't know my dates, whatever it is, but it wasn't 1957, right?
Right.
And I was the first Puerto Rican woman elected in the state of New Jersey. Prior to me being in that chamber, Senator Menendez was there for a short amount of time, and then his trajectory and his career, doors started opening. He kept propelling. But the fact that there was uh, almost a decade lapse in a state that has a huge growing Latino community and very strong ties to Puerto Rico, and I think the third largest community of Puerto Ricanos here in the entire country, that we were not part of the conversation. And so
Mm.
I say this a lot of times when people are like, "Well, what elements can you give to individuals who want to run for office?" I had no idea what I was doing, right? And it took me some time. I was the youngest one when I came into the space. I was a woman. I was Latina. I'm from Newark, and so there's those expectations that other people put on you, that are perceived expectations, that I had to kind of like muddle through and get through. But the most important thing that occurred at that time was that when we were having a policy lens discussion, that there was a voice at the table that had not been heard for a very long time. And so that's why representation matters. It's not
Mm.
that I'm going to come up with a brilliant idea, although I like to say that I come up with a lot of them. It's that the way you see something, and if we're talking about a for instance,
Mm.
that I could take a moment and say, but hold up, you're not thinking about it like this. And I too am having those moments, because from a geographic perspective, I always thought Woodbridge was South Jersey until I joined the state. I realized, oh, Camden, this is very far. And so from a geographic perspective, I started learning about what does quality of life improvement mean for different constituencies and communities, right? What is How does rural communities in the state mirror so much of the needs in our urban centers, even though there are populations that don't look the same? And
Mm.
so it's having those voices at the table, so that when a policy is written and is sent to the governor, that everyone who lives in New Jersey and calls it their home has an opportunity for someone to be advocating from that lens and that voice.
Yeah. Well, at the YW, we launched a initiative in April during Sexual Assault Awareness Month about creating safe spaces in New Jersey politics. As your predecessor, Senator Weinberg, and Lieutenant Governor headed up a workforce here in New Jersey, and the outcome was what many of us know who've worked in these spaces, that um, we want to see women in office. And, over the last few years, we've really, I'd say decade, we've encouraged women to run for office. But when they get there, it's not always a safe environment for them to be in. And so either they, on the way there, back out, or leave once they're there, because it doesn't, there's a lot of sexual assault, sexual harassment, misogyny, happening, that really makes it difficult to be able to, you know, help change the landscape, and help change the view that you're talking about, bring in that really important lens. Um, we launched an effort together with the former senator and the lieutenant governor, video that we've now shared across the state, and they're working now with the attorney general's office on an event around it, just trying to make sure that everyone who works in a political office, or who works on a campaign, understands their rights, understands how to report. um, and our goal with that was to make sure that it created a safe space for women, and more specifically women of color, to be sitting in the seats around you,
Mhm.
where you are. What are, what's your thought on, how we can continue to keep moving the needle on a culture shift in that space, in New Jersey politics? Because, what you bring to the table because of your background, because you're a woman, because you're a Latino woman, because of where you live and hail and come from is so key and important, has it clearly informed your policy and made our state the better, as a result of it. But how can we encourage more women like you, or who have different circumstances, from you, but nonetheless important to be represented, to be around you in those seats?
So thank you for the work that you did, and a debt of gratitude to my predecessor, and of course a phenomenal Essex County woman, the Lieutenant Governor, and Loretta, for all that they did, and what they did in their prior moments when they were in an elected office. Because I was able to see the power of Sheila Oliver in real time
Hmm.
because we were colleagues in county government. Um, and so I think several things, right? So Loretta always said this. I remember sitting in the caucus room, and it was one of those long budget. You just wait. You're waiting. It's like you would wait for 4 hours, and then we'd get word. It was just at the end of the budget season, and it was several women who were sitting in the corner, and we would just laugh. And I remember her sharing this story, just saying, it's incredible that men just get up in the morning and shave, and they're like, oh, I'm going to run for governor and be president of the United States. But women, we get so laser focused on can I go into
Hmm.
this space? Am I equipped? Am I going to let someone down? Will my family suffer? That's what makes us powerful, by the way, because we're
Hmm.
thoughtful. We're thoughtful about it. It's not from a selfish perspective. It comes from a selfless endeavor. But it also keeps us from trying to lean into certain spaces. I
Hmm.
never wanted to run for office. I was asked multiple times, and I said no. And the reason why I accepted it was, my dad and I were having this conversation, and it was rumored in a newspaper. And he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm never going to run for office." And he said, if you don't run, and I'll go through this quickly because I've shared this story on multiple occasions. He said, I'll never forgive you. And I said, I'm the youngest one in the house. I gave my valedictorian speech with green and purple hair. And so I put them through
Hmm.
it. I said, you're going to forgive me. You'll get over it because I was the baby. He was struck by a car and killed 2 weeks after we had that conversation. And that was around the same time where there were vacancies. People were starting to talk about who was going to come into those spaces. And I was at a rally and looking at the stage, and it was homogenous white men of a certain age and
Yeah.
from a certain part of the state. And I said, I can either keep making this kind of assessment, or I can lean into it and change what's happening here. And it was a
Yeah.
very cathartic experience for me. It was the best thing, and ultimately I ended up learning that this pathway was carved out with tears and sweat of generations of women who came before me, and this was chosen for me to be in this space. I fundamentally believe that. I'm here for a purpose, and I'm hoping that every single day, even if people, say, oh, she's at it again, or she's nagging about this issue, that at least we're moving the needle in some positive direction. And so I think those are some of the things that keep us from, we start, are we the
Hmm.
best? Are we equipped? Will we be accepted? And so it's kind of, I think, also offering ourselves an opportunity to be unapologetic.
Hmm.
I'm going to make mistakes. I don't know everything. No, I wasn't groomed to be, but here I am. And and I feel like I'm getting that sense from the younger generation of women. They're unafraid to ask questions. How many times I wouldn't even ask a question to improve my career or my life, because I almost thought that it was disrespectful, right? We get raised in a way where, oh, don't ask the questions, don't do it. So I also grew into this space when I was there,
Yeah.
because I was young, I felt alone. I was told that I should smile more because it would make me more approachable. The list can go on and on. This is not unique to public service, right? So this kind of experience exists in any work environment. We know that we have to do things twice or three times over. And that if you're sitting in a meeting and you come up with a solution, the meeting starts at 9 o'clock, and at 9:10 you've come up with the solution. At 9:40, when it's repeated by a male colleague, then everybody's like, well, that makes sense, right? So we know that we have to work harder in the spaces, but I think that there's starting to be a shift. Not that there isn't one without obstacle, not that there isn't one that's still not inclusive, not that there isn't one that's still in certain circumstances unsafe. But what is beneficial is that when there are like-minded people with you, that at least you can rely on each other. So I come into the Senate space, and then after redistricting, Senator Nellie Poe comes into
Right.
the fold, Senator Nilsa Cruz comes into the fold, and then we started seeing there is a sisterhood on the Senate side. Still not enough of us.
Mm.
I'm proud to say that in the next couple of days, we're also going to have another woman joining into that space, and it is viably important. Not one only to make policy better, but to support each other in these spaces when you sometimes feel alone.
Yes, yes. Well, and you're just reinforcing why our work with young girls is so important as well, because we know that so much of what you just talked about, that kind of as women we talk ourselves out of, moving into certain opportunities, comes from a narrative that's been placed in our heads, during our youth. Some of us, as we've gotten older, have been able to kind of retrain the conversation in our heads and push ourselves away from it. But just think about the power that my daughter and your daughter will have, growing up with a very different,
Yeah,
very different voices in their head, in the most healthy way possible,
I tell
moving them,
her. It's great that you're mentioning that, because I tell her that all of the time. Like every morning, I kiss all of her individual fingers with a different kind of like mantra. Use your voice, be courageous, try your best, all these kind of things. And I'm saying to myself, look, my parents forever deaded and great. That my mother is a shero like no other, and my father is the reason why I'm a feminist, right? Um, but I say, wow, I hope that what I'm doing, coupled with her own independence, she is going to be bold and powerful and brassy in a way where she and your kids can really make a difference, or at least to understand that being a woman is a powerful thing, and it's not something to be put in a second category.
Right, right. Well, although I could keep talking, I can't think of a better place to put a pause in this conversation, and leave all of our viewers with, whatever age you're at, you are bold and you are powerful, and you have the ability to make great change around you and make our society better. If Senator Ruiz didn't hear her calling, where would so many New Jerseyans be today on so many of these important issues that are so near and dear to the YWCA? For sure. And, we all have the capacity in some way, whatever it is, but we all have the capacity in some way, to be impacting in a positive way. So, I want to make sure that you all know how to stay in touch with the senator. As I always tell our viewers, we're so grateful that we have elected officials like you who are, doing such important work, so connected and aligned with the mission of our work at the YW. But whether you voted for folks or not, once they're in office, they work for you, and you should stay in touch with them and let them know what's on your mind, what are your values, and what's important to you. The senator has a website where you can reach out to her. We are going to have it dropped into our link here so that you can connect with her and also just learn more about her work, her initiatives, her policy that she's working on. um, you know whatever groups you are connected to, it's a wonderful opportunity, again, when they're like-minded. This isn't about politics, this is about policy, this is about values. This isn't around party. This is around making New Jersey a better place. And we should all be thinking about where and how we can support that. So, with that, Senator, I do hope that this is the first of many conversations
It
we
is.
have
Can I
You
just,
know,
I want to add
please.
one thing today. So I hopped on and I had just come back from South Amboy, and I just want to give a great shout out to Speaker Coughlin and I, who've been working in the space of food insecurity. And the governor today signed bills that will bring and equip families the ability to have them make our school lunches and breakfast programs more affordable. New Jersey has been a
Thank
front
goodness.
runner. We eliminated the reduced category years ago. Now we're expanding the income eligibility. So today has been a great day for families in the state, and the governor did sign that. And my friend, the speaker, has worked collectively with me in recognizing that we have, opportunities to uplift people. And then just in your closing remarks, you said,
Yes.
I just want to share the following things to say. Don't be afraid to ask the question, whatever it is, whatever work environment. What is the worst thing someone can say? No. And I say this out loud because I have to remind myself of that. What is the worst thing? Or you get embarrassed for a little bit? The best part about falling down is to show the grace that you have of getting up, right? And then I would be remiss if I just didn't give a shout out to nuestra familia aquí en el estado de New Jersey y todas las comunidades latinas, sumamente orgullosa de ser tu representante a nivel estatal. Quiero darle las gracias a todo el mundo. Tenemos que luchar y trabajar. Todavía tenemos muchos problemas y muchas oportunidades a traer recursos a nuestra comunidad, pero considérame parte de tu familia, considérame tu representante y tu voz en el estado de New Jersey.
Well, I'm so grateful that you wrapped up with those important points and, sharing it bilingually, to our community. Again, we are so grateful that we have you and, those like you fighting for our New Jersey citizens and making sure, and again, sharing that those bills were signed today just, further reinforces that, as much as there's so much work to do, we're definitely making some good steps in the right direction. Um, so we will keep talking and keep shedding light and keeping the focus where it needs to be, even with the difficult conversations. They are so important, and as you said, the important thing is where we go from them and where we pick ourselves up from, and keep going. And we do that together, linked arms for sure. So
Thank you
with that,
for the work that you do.
thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and making the time. And to our viewers, it's the weekend, and I hope that means for some of you some time to rest and recharge. And please stay connected to the YW for future events and YW TVs. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye, Senator. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.